All rise. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, this special ceremony session of Superior Court for the County of Wake is now convened and sitting for the regular dispatch of business. The Honorable Superior Court Judge G. Brian Collins is present and presiding. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, God save the state and this honorable court. Please be seated. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
I want to welcome all of you to this special ceremonial session of the Wake County Superior Court. Especially want to welcome those of you who are the friends and the family of our honorees. We thank you for letting us do this. It's very important to us to be able to do it. We also know that during their careers, they probably spent more time with us at times than they did with you. So thank you for sharing them with us. They all made important contributions to our bar and to our community, and we're just very pleased and honored to be able to recognize them. This time I'm going to turn the proceedings over to the chair of the Wake County Bar's Memorials Committee, Mary Winstead.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Winstead. As Judge Collins said, I'm chair of the Wake County Bar Association 10th Judicial District Memorials Committee. It is an honor for me to have the opportunity to serve as the chair of the committee that plans and hosts these memorial sessions. And I want to thank all the committee members for their time and dedication. On behalf of the members of the committee, I also want to welcome everyone to this special memorial session of court. This is our second live session since the pandemic, and it is wonderful to be here with you. The four distinguished lawyers that we honor today have been remembered in other ways and at other services. But this memorial session of court is different because it allows our bar to celebrate the lives of our members with their families, friends, and colleagues. It is appropriate that we gather in this space to remember your family members and honor our deceased brothers in the law and pay them homage. After all, as Judge Collins mentioned, many of your loved ones likely spend as much time in these courtrooms and with other lawyers as with their families. And so it is fitting that we pay tribute to them in this place, in this special session. I've been a member of this committee for several years and have always found these sessions inspiring. At every memorial session I attend, I've left the courtroom feeling uplifted and inspired, with a profound sense of pride in our bar. I've learned wonderful and interesting things about lawyers, some of whom I didn't know and some of whom I thought I knew, but I found out a little more at the session. These sessions of court also reveal so much about the amazing lawyers of our local bar. Besides being exceptional lawyers, our attorneys have many great attributes and talents and contribute to the community in a variety of ways. As we dealt with the impact of the pandemic on our ability to hold these live sessions and gatherings, I wondered and worried about how the passage of time would affect these services. This year, I viewed the services from a different perspective as my brother was remembered at the last session. For our family and friends, the service several years after his death was a welcomed opportunity for reflection and remembrance. It is the sincere hope of our bar and our committee that this session of court will be a memorable and special time for you. Today, we collectively pause from the business of meting out justice in these courtrooms and all that that entails to honor four attorneys who are no longer with us, but who have each left a legacy that we want to honor. On behalf of the Memorials Committee, I want to thank you, the families of our honorees, for sharing them with us and for allowing us to honor them. Our first honoree today is Charles Fulton, and he will be remembered by Barry Mann.
Good afternoon. My name's Barry Mann, and I have spent my entire career at a law firm started by Charlie Fulton in 1954 with Howard Manning. It's my honor to speak on his behalf, as I did at his funeral 5 years ago. In fact, for those who were there, you may hear some of the same remarks, but when I worked hard on his funeral speech, I thought a lot about it, so much of it we duplicated, but some of y'all will appreciate this, those who were at the funeral 5 years ago. Charlie was born on December 11th, 1927. He died almost 90 years later on 11/29/18. He was raised by a single mother with his brother in the mountains. He was very smart. He enrolled in Chapel Hill in 1943 at the age of 15. John Connell, you couldn't have done that. He went to law. He majored in math and political science at Chapel Hill and continued his education at the UNC Law School, which in 1950 he graduated second in his class. He then went and served in the Navy, where he was a lieutenant. Served in the Navy for 4 years. One of the best days of his life was when he met a guy named Tom Oates. Tom Oates was a fellow Navy person and was married to a lady named Marilyn. Tom died during their years in the service tragically in a plane crash. And Charlie ended up marrying Marilyn and at the time her 4 children. So it's a sweet story that I always enjoy mentioning. They had a 5th, David, so the 5 of them grew up with Charlie and Marilyn since that time. He moved to Raleigh after getting out of the Navy, and he met an ornery old man named Howard Manning. And they formed the law firm Manning and Fulton at the time. Bill Skinner came along a couple years later. It became Manning, Fulton, and Skinner. And for over 65 years, it's still Manning, Fulton, and Skinner. I'm really, you think it's a solemn responsibility to speak on behalf of someone like Charlie. So what I said at the funeral is sort of what I'm going to suggest to you today. I'm going to begin by outlining 5 character traits of Charlie professionally. One is his expertise. This is not going to surprise anybody in attendance who knew Charlie, but he was absolutely the best real estate attorney in the state. Everybody viewed him that way. He probably got more calls weekly from real estate practitioners than anybody for seeking his advice and assistance and guidance. Attorneys involved in real property disputes would clamor to get him as an expert witness because they knew if Charlie was on the other side, it wasn't going to be good. Charlie and I used to attend a title insurance seminar where about 40 attorneys would show up. We'd go over case law, and the matter that we talked about wasn't settled until Charlie had the final word. And everybody knew that. This is interesting. Lawyers have these publications where self-servingly they say, the best lawyer in the state is this and that. Well, the first one I remember was Business North Carolina. In 2002, they decided they would determine the best lawyers in the state in the various practice areas. And this is a question that was asked. Of the Tar Heel lawyers whose work you have observed firsthand, whom would you rate the best? Well, guess who won the real property category? Charlie Fulton. So then 2003 rolls around, and the ballots are sent out again, and the ballots are tallied, and guess what? Charlie Fulton won again in the real property category. So from that point forward, the Business North Carolina knew they weren't going to sell magazines if the same people won every year. So they invoked the so-called Charlie Fulton rule that said you can only win once, after which you became in the Hall of Fame. And that's what happened to Charlie. Work ethic, a second trait. I've never seen a lawyer with a better focus and work ethic than Charlie Fulton. Long hours at the office for him were a norm. Marshall Happer used to tell about going up, and Tom Worth could confirm this, going up there on weekends, wanting to catch up on your work only to find Howard Manning and Charlie Fulton in the office already. And they gave you more work, so the work you thought you were going to catch up with was added to. He was a ridiculous typist. His fingers were about twice the size, that's one finger. But you could type about 125, 150 words a minute on a manual typewriter, and so you could always hear Charlie tapping out something. But what he could produce in a draft had such sophistication, even the first drafts, that it was pretty much unparalleled. He embraced technology, however, quickly. I remember when computers came about, and he saw me, we all had typewriters, I think, at the time, or dictaphones, and nobody could understand me anyway, so he recognized that, and he said, Barry, I need you to come to my house on Saturday morning, where Anna and the boys could tell you that he worked every Saturday morning. He said, I'm going to teach you how to use a computer. So one Saturday morning, I go to his house, and that's when we had display rights, or is that what the computers were called back then? He taught me how to use a computer. Happer recalls a time that Charlie tried a case alone. No one thought Charlie was a trial attorney, but Happer claims he was the best one he's ever seen. He said one time Charlie tried a case alone. He had no witnesses, no exhibits, no evidence, but he made such a compelling summation to the jury that he won the case. Unfortunately, the judge had to set aside the verdict for lack of evidence. A third character trait of Charlie's was confidence. If you knew Charlie, you knew he did not lack in confidence. When I first met him in the summer of '81 when I clerked there, I had the same reaction that many of you had, complete and utter fear. His personality was strong and intimidating. In letters to other lawyers, he would often use the clause, as any competent attorney should know. It was almost 3 years before he even let me call him Mr. Fulton. One time we had a lawyer sort of slink in the office that tell us to say he was leaving our firm to go to another firm. And Charlie says, son, I've already heard about your decision. It's a stupid one, and it's irrevocable. I'm also reminded, this is true, I heard some of this maybe not true, but this is true because the guy told me himself. One time a guy asked Charlie to represent him in a case, and Charlie says, I'm sorry, I can't, I got a conflict because I'm already representing the other side. And the guy said, well, I really wanted you, but can you recommend someone else? And Charlie says, you know it won't make any difference because I'm on the other side. A fourth trait of Charlie's insistence on excellence. Charlie wanted things done correctly and efficiently, and he wanted his partners to do the same. He knew how to groom us. Tom and Ted and I all were co-counsel to Charlie on a number of things. He didn't need any help, but he wanted to groom us as attorneys. Every member of Manning, Fulton, and Skinner has a different Charlie Fulton story related to how he developed you. And the instructions were always direct. They were not particularly genteel. One of the things that Charlie always wanted from his attorneys were for them to write and speak clearly. As you can tell, I don't speak clearly. So one day he came to me and he said he had written 2 words on a piece of paper. One was spelled S-U-R-E, and one was spelled S-H-O-R-E. And he said to me, do you know you say those 2 words exactly the same? And walked away. A fifth professional trait of Charlie's was service to the bar. Many of you knew Charlie was a great attorney who thought the practice was a profession. He was the North Carolina Bar Association president in 1983 to 84. During that year, he was instrumental in bringing around IOTA, the interest on lawyers' trust accounts. But that part of the law was important to Charlie, that serving the profession. Yet to remember Charlie only as a professional would be a great disservice to Charlie. More than anything else, I came to know Charlie Fulton as something that I didn't initially recognize. He was compassionate, caring, loyal, a family man, mentor, and friend. He adored his family. 4 of his children are here, grandchildren are here, daughters-in-law are here. He loved, he never missed an opportunity to brag about them. So it was just a big deal to him. He enjoyed playing tennis and racquetball. I got to admit, as I was coming along, I played tennis with Charlie, and I let him win until it was time to go to work, and then over. He was a chair umpire. You see these chair umpires at professional tennis tournaments. Marshall Happer sort of started the racket club, and he enlisted Charlie in as an umpire, and Charlie immediately became a star at it. He had like 20/10 vision, so he could, and he was, again, did not lack for confidence. There's some famous stories about Charlie having a little fight with Nasazi and Jimmy Connors, and he could handle himself well. He was a master bridge player. One time, Happer tells a story about, and I know nothing about bridge, but apparently he started with the 9 of spades, and Charlie told him what the other 12 cards in his hand were. So he was an expert, or a master, I think is what they call him. He was a man of faith, and he was loyal to his church, the Grace Lutheran Church. He's a Lutheran. Loved his clients and friends. One of the things that he instilled upon all of us is sort of your clients should become your friends. Treat them like friends. Treat them respectfully. One of the best legacies from Charlie is writing a note. He probably literally wrote hundreds or probably thousands of notes, and it's an art that is lost among people who think they can get by with a text instead of a note. Charlie didn't let that happen, but he wrote when my 3rd daughter was born one of the nicest notes I ever remember receiving. And he really, really enjoyed practicing law with his fellow attorneys. Tom Worth was here. Tom is the oldest person in this courtroom today. So, yes. Ted Oliver, Steve Bird, myself, we just loved practicing law with Charlie Fulton. The random acts of kindness that he showed my family and me over the years they're just too numerous to list. I remember we have 3 daughters, and when the first one was born, first gift I got was a pink dress that you don't wear at the time. He knew we were going to get a lot of pink dresses, so he gave one that you could wear when you were about 2. And that got handed down to her subsequently. Charlie, like I said, shared a love for tennis with me. He arranged trips to the U.S. Open, and one year we went to Wimbledon where I saw Pete Sampras lose. Sampras won 7 out of 8 years. We went there the year he lost. So that was interesting. And we saw Martina Hingis play Steffi Graf. Martina was 15. Same age Charlie was when he started college. He'd go to the farmer's market on weekends, and he would always bring by the Mann family mums for Ashley, or fruit or vegetables. Back then I drove a Buick, and so he knew it was a big deal to me for letting me to drive his car. He always had a Mercedes, and Mercedes was sort of something I thought I could never have. I don't have one still, but I did get rid of the Buick. But one time I was going to invest in some real estate, and I didn't have the money. He left a check on my desk signed with the amount blank. So I didn't use it. I couldn't do it. Anyway, I know one of the measures of a man's worth is how he, whether or not he made a difference in this world. Charlie Fulton made a difference in the community, in the law firm, for the bar. And he was just a preeminent role model as an attorney. We miss him still, but we think about him daily, and I sure have enjoyed the journey I had with him. Thank you.
Advertisement for the Memorials Committee. We divide up the names of the attorneys, and when I saw Charles Fulton, I had gone all through school with his daughter, Anna Oates Menzies, and I said, I'm going to take that name, and we have reconnected, and I think today's the first time I've seen her in 50 years, so we'd love to have you on the committee if you'd like to join. Our next honoree is Charles Blanchard, and he will be remembered by Lennie Jernigan.
Before I begin my prepared remarks, I want to remind people that thanks to the History Committee We did a videotape of Charlie Blanchard, I think in 2015. I looked at it last night on YouTube. Just type in Charlie Blanchard interview, Wake County Bar, and it'll come right up. And I think it's a really interesting interview and give you a lot more stuff about him that I can do in the 5 minutes we've got. Judge Collins, distinguished guests, the Blanchard family, and friends, it is altogether fitting that the Wake County Bar Association have this event today for Charles Fuller Blanchard, because Charlie was indeed a lawyer's lawyer. What does that phrase mean? It begins with respect by your fellow professionals. It recognizes that you're one of the top lawyers intellectually of your peers. You know the rules of law and apply them with skill and discretion. And if you were a lawyer and you needed help, you would select this lawyer to give you advice and counsel and representation if needed. It describes a lawyer who has a profound understanding of the law and how it relates to society in general, someone who is grounded in humility, honesty, and service to the community. Charlie Blanchard was all that and more. There's a great line in the book To Kill a Mockingbird that applies to Charlie. When the lawyer Atticus Finch is standing alone in the courtroom at his table, gathering his papers and getting ready to walk out of the courthouse, he had just lost a tough case representing a black man who was wrongly convicted by a jury in Georgia. The courtroom is empty except for his daughter Scout, who was with black people in the balcony, who are standing looking down at Atticus, not saying a word, and the courtroom is silent. A black gentleman leans down to Atticus's daughter and says, "Stand up, Miss Scout. Your father is passing." The respect those individuals had for Atticus Finch is the same respect others in Raleigh and beyond had for Charlie Blanchard. Respect by fellow lawyers is earned. It is not given freely. So how did Charlie Blanchard get it? He grew up in Raleigh near 5 Points and was a fine student, an active member of a church. He was an Eagle Scout. He went to Duke University, where he was president of the student body. He became a commissioned officer and served aboard a minesweeper and 2 submarine chasers in World War II. After the war, he went to Duke Law School and then practiced law in Raleigh starting in 1950 and had a distinguished career primarily in civil law. In 1962, he was one of the founders of the North Carolina Academy of Trial Lawyers, a statewide organization dedicated to teaching trial skills to lawyers who helped individuals in civil matters. He became president in 1970. That organization is now called the North Carolina Advocates for Justice and is still going strong. He was president of the Wake County Bar Association and was awarded its highest honor, the Joseph Branch Professionalism Award. He was a man with a unique sense of empathy and compassion for those who suffer. I think it came from having 2 major events in his life, as well as having a worldview grounded in the humanities and an appreciation for the fragility of life. The first event was the death of his son, Charlie, who died after only living for 10 days. The other was the life of one of his daughters, Leela, who was born with multiple special needs. He and his family took care of her faithfully until she died at the age of 64. Charlie had a profound faith and was a member of St. Michael's Episcopal Church for 65 years. He had a regular tennis match with 3 other men most of his life. They were Gilly Nicholson, Albert Root, and Jim Dorsett, all of them great men in their own right. He had a great sense of humor and a wonderful laugh with his raspy voice. He enjoyed the symphony, the opera, and the theater. For 50 years, he participated with a group that met monthly and presented papers on various topics. On one occasion, I was invited as a guest, and Charlie was the guest speaker. He pulled out a faded, multi-folded paper from his coat, and that looked like he had typed it about 20 years ago. And then he described in great detail and analyzed the Battle of Midway and its significance on American history. He was truly a scholar and a Renaissance man. Bernard Blanchard, his beloved wife of 54 years, died in 2007, And years later, he married Archie Blanchard, and she died in 2021, about 6 months before Charlie died at age 98. While married to Bernard, I think around early 2000s, he had a stroke and a heart attack, and he was in a coma for 3 weeks in the hospital. The family told that he might never leave the hospital, and if he did, he would go to a nursing home for the rest of his life. Those were dark days. I remember visiting him at Rex and thinking how sad it was that he would be leaving us. But instead, in true Charlie Blanchard fashion, he survived with no complications and went on to practice law for 17 more years. Bob Estill, a bishop of the Episcopal Church and another good friend of Charlie's, used to joke about that incredible recovery. He told me one time, "That Charlie Blanchard is an amazing man. I gave him his last rites at Rex Hospital when he was on his deathbed, and about 6 months later he calls me and wants me to preside at his wedding. He told me he was in love and wanted to get married." Indeed, Charlie Fuller Blanchard was an amazing man, a great lawyer, and a citizen of the world. As some of us watched him walking away from the courtroom of life, gathering his papers in silence, and leaving us for the last time, we said to anyone who didn't notice, "Stand up, Charlie Blanchard is passing." Thank you.
Good afternoon, Judge, distinguished guest. I'm here to talk about Frank Dail. Francis E. Dail, master decoder of the North Carolina Rules of Appellate Procedure, longtime institutional memory of the Court of Appeals, and my mentor, was the embodiment of what a civil servant should be. As clerk of court, Frank oversaw and supervised a staff of more than a dozen deputy clerks responsible for processing and preserving every record, brief, motion, petition, exhibit, and piece of correspondence filed with the court, then preparing every order, opinion, mandate, and calendar filed by the court. A mistake in any one of those functions, no matter how small, carried serious consequences, and Frank demanded the same attention to detail from staff that he expected of himself. That said, I never heard him raise his voice or belittle someone under his supervision, and believe me, I alone gave him ample opportunity. In addition to all this, Frank oversaw the several bank accounts maintained for the court's work, prepared its docket, answered to each judge and her staff, served as the complaint desk for the court, and tackled the countless other tasks inherent in a bureaucracy. In spite of which, Mr. Dail, as I always called him, found time, rather made time, to answer each and every question put to him over the phone or in person, whether it came from a senior partner at a large corporate firm in Charlotte, a newly minted attorney handling her first case on appeal in name your small town, North Carolina, or a barely literate pro se party. He spent hours of each day guiding attorneys and non-attorneys alike through the minefield that is the rules of appellate procedure, which I maintain are as unuser-friendly as any set of rules ever adopted by any court in any jurisdiction. As a result, he helped countless thousands avoid mistakes they would otherwise have made, thereby improving the quality of work filed with the court, the corresponding decisions made by the court, and our state's jurisprudence. Believe it or not, this was somewhat subversive. More than one chief judge admonished Frank, and me years later, that under no circumstances was he to interpret the rules or to suggest how the court may rule in a matter before it. We were told emphatically that we could point out the operative rule or rules when asked and no more. What Frank understood and passed on to me is that more often than not, the person asking the question had limited appellate experience, if any at all, and that we had a unique opportunity to be of assistance. He was careful to point out to each and every person seeking his counsel that he was not speaking on behalf of the court, of the judges, or anticipating their ultimate decision. Having made that disclaimer, he would then patiently and clearly explain the possible consequences of competing strategies. Frank liked to remind me that the people on the other end of the line were paying our salaries, and we owed it to them to be as helpful as we could. That is Frank Dail's professional legacy, and why to this day he is still remembered so fondly by so many attorneys in this state. If only I had a nickel for every time I heard these words. Well, I guess if I can't talk to Frank, you'll have to do. In all my 25 years as clerk, I always tried to do, while realizing that I wasn't filling the shoes of the man who to me will always be the clerk. Let me talk briefly about Frank Dail the person, which is a story of service to others. Francis E. Dail was born in Kinston, North Carolina on October the 28th, 1940, the eldest of 4 children born within a span of 5 years. His father died when Frank was only 15. At that young age, he became the man of the house, a role which he never relinquished, and best illustrated by the fact that he helped pay for each of his 3 younger siblings' college education. Frank graduated from High Point College in 1963, after which he obtained a degree from Duke Divinity School. In spite of being a deeply religious man his whole life, he did not feel called to the clergy, and so he enlisted in the Army, where he spent the next 4 years as a linguist, specializing in the Czech language. In addition to serving as an interpreter, Lieutenant Dail was also something of a double-naught spy, intercepting and decoding messages sent between Czechoslovakia and other Soviet bloc nations. Following his Army service, Frank attended Wake Forest School of Law, from which he graduated in 1973, thereupon entering the practice of law in Pinehurst. In 1976, he was hired by the Court of Appeals as its second clerk of court, serving in that capacity until 1993, when the judges, tired of sharing him with the public, made him the court's first administrative counsel. Until his retirement in 2008, Frank remained in that role, providing invaluable insight and advice to the judges, their staff, and most importantly, to me. For his dedication and contributions to the judicial system in the state, he was awarded the Chief Justice's Professionalism Award for meritorious and extraordinary service. His contributions extended beyond the judiciary. In tandem with his beloved and devoted wife of 49 years, Lana, Frank taught Sunday school to a generation of 5-year-olds at Edenton Street Methodist, where he also served as chair of that historic church's governing body for 3 years. Frank was famous for his quick wit and his groan-inducing puns, which flowed effortlessly from his love of wordplay. He was the consummate gentleman, never rude or inappropriate. I never heard him say a mean thing to or about anyone. I consider it one of the great joys and privileges of my life to have worked with him closely for 25 years. Frank Dail died the day after his 81st birthday in October 2021, following a long and stoic battle with cancer. Lana was, as always, at his side. Just hours before dying, Frank received communion at his bedside. I have it on good authority that he had to correct his pastor on some of the liturgical phrasing. Very fitting. Thank you for letting me talk to you today about Frank Dail.
Now, Jane Weatherly will speak about Timothy Vanderweert.
I'm in these courtrooms every single day, and this is perhaps one of the most nervous I think that I've been, because I am extremely honored and humbled to be here to remember Tim Vanderweert. To our profession, he gave over 30 of his short 64 years as a lawyer. But as my friend, I was blessed that he chose to be a lawyer, because I may have never otherwise met Tim or his amazing wife, Donna. So I met Tim several years ago as a fellow criminal defense attorney, It's a tough, often thankless job where we see people at their worst. But for those who practiced with Tim, Tim was always willing to brainstorm ideas about cases with anyone who was wise enough to seek out his extensive knowledge, experience, and creativity. As he was generous with his time with other lawyers, he was gracious with clients who desperately needed his advocacy but couldn't afford to pay him. Tim was a fierce advocate. He cared and listened to his clients. And whether friend or foe, human or animal, Tim just cared. For those who knew Tim outside of the law, he wasn't just the guy with a ponytail who often wore double-breasted suits. He was vibrant, funny, witty, and genuine, and he had such a zest for life. And he loved Donna with his whole heart. But the thing that always impressed me about Tim was that he was really, really smart. And I'm not talking smart in the traditional way. Tim got his JD from Carolina, his Master of Arts from Duke. He studied at Oxford, and he was published in several peer-reviewed academic journals. He was really smart because he understood it was important to take time for himself. If he wasn't traveling or immersed in another culture or studying for yet another degree, and unfortunately battling cancer, he exercised his profound artistry. His paintings are reminiscent of Jackson Pollock. His photographs have been showcased in galleries in the United States and Paris, and as I've recently learned, showcased as well in some esteemed judges' homes, too. Back in March, his wife Donna held an amazing, stunning memorial for Tim. And it was made up almost entirely of photographs that Tim had taken. I was astonished to learn that Tim had actually curated all of this before he passed. But then it made sense, because Tim knew that he was dying, and that was how he wanted to be remembered. Whether in a memorial setting with several photographs or just a single one, Tim always had an uncanny ability to make a picture speak the proverbial 1,000 words, but yet leave the viewer begging for 1,000 more. And my opinion is echoed by the countless words of admiration and appreciation posted on his blog from people who never even met Tim, but were simply captivated by his work. I am thankful that Donna has kept his blog up and running, and I think that the name says it all. That's Lycophilia, Leica, L-E-I-C-A, for a camera, and philia for love. And I am also thankful to Tim for embracing his gift. Tim's photographs are a reminder to make time for ourselves, our friends, and family. It's something that too often lawyers just don't do enough. Or maybe it's best said by one of our former criminal defense colleagues who recently shared with me. Tim was an avid fan of Ducati motorcycles, and as they used to joke, ride it like you stole it. Thank you.
Those were 4 wonderful presentations about 4 giants in our profession, and that was just really wonderful, and hope you're as inspired as I am. I want to thank our esteemed judge, Judge Collins, for always being so accommodating and available to preside over these sessions. Thanks also to our clerk of court, Blair Williams, for coordinating a lot of the logistics. Thanks to our bailiff and our clerk. Thanks also to Whitney Von Hom, the executive director of the bar, Nathaniel Adcock, our staff liaison, and Amy Davis, who prepared the beautiful program. As you might have been told, and you can see, the session is videotaped, and after Brian Miller makes some edits, it will be posted on the Wake County Bar Association YouTube site for posterity. So you can view it there and enjoy it for years to come. Thank you again to all of you for sharing your loved ones with us.
Is it back to me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Everybody has been properly and duly thanked except for Mary Winstead. Mary's the chair of our committee. She makes this happen. Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here, so thank you for asking me. Feel free to mingle with each other after it's over because we're not doing anything else in this courtroom today. But Mr. Sheriff, please adjourn this special ceremonial session of the Wake County Superior Court. Sine die.
Yes, sir. All rise. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. This special session of Superior Court now stands adjourned. Sine die. God save the state, this honorable court.
Thank you very much.